All right, everyone. Well, welcome back, and we are very lucky joined today by Australian ADCC trials winner Josh Saunders. So, look, Josh, thank you very much for joining us today. Look, getting straight into it, first question I wanted to ask you was, what was the most difficult aspect in preparing and competing in the Australian ADCC trials? You know, whether it was the physical preparation or the mental preparation for the trials.
First of all, guys, thanks for having me. I appreciate the time and effort. Obviously, I don't think I'm that interesting of a character, but people seem to think so and they want to talk to me. So it's always a welcome surprise. But I think to put a funny point on it, I think talking so much shit that you're going to win beforehand for 6 months and actually having to back it up was one of the things that was a bit of a struggle. But that's the whole thing that I say. I do what I say and I say what I do. And the physical preparation obviously had its qualities. I think 13 sessions a day is no joke, depending on how you look at it, from anybody's perspective, from a professional athlete's perspective, from an amateur's perspective. So that was definitely had its moments. And obviously there's sessions where you don't really want to go into the gym. You feel a little bit fatigued. You may have had a rough day at work. I'm obviously very fortunate enough to run an online business. So my training schedule dictates my work schedule rather than the opposite. But yeah, there were some challenging qualities. But I think if you're willing to do something great, you're willing to fight challenges.
100%. Look, Josh, obviously you began your jiu-jitsu journey a little under 2 years ago, and you've achieved so much in that time. But before you became involved in jiu-jitsu, what sort of sports were you gravitating towards? And were there any sports that you think helped your jiu-jitsu preparations come along?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I started jiu-jitsu, I was actually 3 years retired from professional rugby league. I played in an NRL system for the Raiders. I never actually debuted. I was quite close to doing so and never actually had that transpire, but I was playing for New South Wales Cup, SG Ball, under 20. I had 2 years under 20s at the Rabbitohs. And I played rugby league from a very, very young age. So obviously the developmental qualities of speed and hand-eye coordination, agility, strength and power, I definitely think that was a benefit traveling into grappling. And there's a distinction that a lot of people in grappling are typically your thought leaders and chess master type of characters. Some would say nerds.
Yep.
which is very typical of a lot of jiu-jitsu people. And I think that's no different in the heavyweight division at this current moment in time. And you start to see people like myself and Nick Rodriguez, who are athletic background people, start to excel very, very quickly with very little amounts of training just because of an athletic base. So, I would definitely say that rugby league helped for my ascension in this sport. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, Josh, in your opinion, what is the biggest mistake or issue in how jiu-jitsu is being taught today? Because from my eyes, and I accredit this entirely to my current coaches at Grapple Factory, it's the correct activation of muscle groups while doing jiu-jitsu and also giving people the tools to get the submissions rather than simply teaching someone, here's a triangle, go and do the triangle now. So in your opinion, what's the biggest issue in how jiu-jitsu is being taught today?
I think first and foremost, mate, one of the biggest issues is that most coaches don't continue to learn once they get to black belt. I think that's a huge problem for most coaches. I also think the fact that some coaches don't take the responsibility in becoming a coach. They're rather an athlete that's 10 years ahead of their athletes. I think walking the walk and talking the talk in terms of being a coach are two very different things. If you want to be an athlete, be an athlete. If you want to be a coach, be a coach. That's obviously very representative of my coach, Luke Martin. He takes his athletics very seriously. He still trains every day with us. He puts in but he's also far more dedicated to being a coach than he is to an athlete. And I think that speaks volumes to the success that our team's having. I also think that there's a lot of people very set in their ways. I don't think there's a lot of permeability for their understanding to change over a long period of time. I think the way that the Gracies came up is obviously fundamental for the sport, but at the same time, as sports continue to grow and evolve, to take a page from the book from rugby league, from a sport that I used to come from, you're no longer continuing to teach people the 1980s way of playing.
Yeah.
And I think that's very transparent in the way that some of these coaches are articulating themselves on the mats, where they're saying things like, play your game or watch your neck. It's like, yeah, bro, I fucking am watching my neck. I'm in a grappling tournament, for fuck's sake.
100%. Look, Josh, I commented on your Instagram post the other night about your journey from white belt to brown belt, and mentioned that your work ethic is, the only way I could describe it was animalistic, which is evident given the fact you've gone from white belt to now heading to Vegas in September for the ADCC. This work ethic that you have, is it something that you've always sort of had through rugby league, through growing up, or is it something that kind of got pushed along and developed as you got into jiu-jitsu?
I think intrinsically, I've always had an ability to know that you have to work hard to get things that you want. Obviously, from a very young age, I saw my parents struggling to sort of put together some money and all that sort of stuff. And I saw that there was a tangible struggle there. And I knew that obviously challenges would be arising. And I think building yourself into a person that developed the skill sets necessary to go through those challenges more adequately is something that I've focused on a lot in my personal development. And I think you don't have a limitation of ways to solve a problem. You have a limitation of skills developed for that specific problem. And I think if you keep looking at it through the same lens, you're just going to keep going through the same cycle. A mentor actually said to me today, if you don't reflect, you repeat.
That's true.
It's a very powerful 3-word sentence. And I think if you're not having the ability to look at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and start to deconstruct that and break that down, you're going to repeat the cycle again and again and again. And we see this in many forms of martial arts, especially in jiu-jitsu and grappling. And people are doing the same thing day in, day out, learning here is a triangle, here is an arm bar, here is a guard pass to side control. And then they're wondering why they keep getting whooped by people like us in competition.
Yeah, for sure. So, look, Josh, you're going to be representing Australia on the largest stage in the world for BJJ in arguably the toughest division as well, heading into ADCC. Can you talk about your pride in that achievement, having achieved it so early in your jiu-jitsu career? As whilst the hard work, I'm sure for you, is just beginning, it's a monumental achievement to reach ADCC.
One small caveat to that question is that 77 kilo is definitely the hardest division in the entirety. I think actually the 99 kilo plus division has the most champions, or the most previous champions. We have a total of 5. But I do believe that 77 is an absolute murderer's row, and whoever goes through there is a nutcase. But to answer the other part of the question, I don't actually think about it too much, to be completely honest. I think the more that we seem to perceive the grandiosity of our achievements, the more we can smell the roses. But at the same time, there's work that needs to be done. I don't actually believe that. I do believe that you can pat yourself on the back. You tell yourself you're proud of yourself. But I think if you're too far ahead of yourself in terms of your thought patterns and your processes, like, oh, I get to represent Australia in a sport or any of these sorts of things, I think you can get a little bit away from yourself. It's not to take away from the achievement. I am very grateful for the opportunity that I've worked my fucking ass off to get to. But at the same time, it's not really in my thought process all that much, to be completely honest.
Josh, we've spoken to guys like Jamie Malarkey and Eileen Blenkow and John Wayne Parr and stuff on how we can build mixed martial arts in Australia and promote it. Now, I want to ask you the same question on BJJ, because, jiu-jitsu is not a popular sport that everyone sort of gravitates towards. Myself, I was in rugby league, and yourself, rugby league, rugby union. So what can be done in Australia to sort of promote and build the Brazilian jiu-jitsu scene? Is it, through kids programs in gyms? Is it through more competitions? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a good question, mate. Kids programs would obviously be one of the fundamental things, getting them into the sport early enough. You also run the risk of kids programs being too much for people. You start to see this in the rugby league scene, where people are in rugby league from 4 years old until 17, and they start to burn out before they make SG ball teams. And that's definitely a consideration for the sport. I think the work of people like Matt Morris and George Hanlon putting together events like Subversion, I think the Salmon Challenge by Burak, I think Boa and the guys that organise that down in Melbourne, and starting to bring a spectator element to the sport, is going to be fundamental in the popularity in Australia, specifically with Subversion now being streamed live on Flow Grappling. Again, it's a jiu-jitsu dominated app. Obviously, we have the consideration that 99% of the people who participate in the sport are the spectators. It's a very strange setup for the sport, because if you ask everybody down the local who's watching Origin tomorrow night, everybody will say yes. They may have never picked up a rugby league ball in their entire life, but they will be watching. So that's a challenge that we do face in the sport. But to answer your question, I think people like myself and people obviously like Gordon and stuff that have personalities, they have an ability to articulate themselves at a higher level. They're not just meatheads. They don't just bash and crash and have nothing on the side of it. You see everybody in MMA, like the Conor McGregors, the guys that actually have talking ability and they can market themselves and show themselves to an audience. I think specifically it comes down to an individual's perspective, but I also think the sport being more marketable through through different avenues of streaming and live events and stuff like that. I mean, everybody I've brought to Subversion that came to watch me at the last event or the previous event, they said, please, you need to tell me exactly when the next event is that you're on, because I absolutely love the event. And they're people who've never grappled in their life.
Yeah, for sure. So within your bracket for ADCC, is there one grappler in particular that you would really enjoy testing your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu against?
I would love to beat the shit out of Nicky Rod in the first round. Yes, I would. I think it's a perfect matchup for me. I think the storylines are very similar. He went to his first ADCC with less than 2 years experience. He's the big, athletic, hungry guy that's coming up through the ranks. I was going to be one of the first blue belts ever to compete at ADCC, but that would be a terrible way to sandbag my way to that division. And obviously, you have to promote people when they become undeniable and start ruining the competitions that are put in front of them. To be honest, every single person in that division I'd love to have a match with. Gordon is obviously Gordon. He's going to be a tremendous challenge for anybody that goes on to face him. I obviously have favoritism against myself against a lot of the other competitors. But yeah, any opportunity to verse any one of those guys would be pretty awesome. But yeah, let's get Nicky Rod in the first round. We'll see what happens.
Let's do it. Look, man, Josh, last question from us. I know you got training, so we don't keep it too long, but what's a day in the life like for you at the moment? Because I know I saw your post saying 13 sessions a week. There's got to be a lot of preparation, obviously probably a bit more heading into ADCC. So what's a day in the life of Josh Saunders like these days?
Typical schedule. I get up around 8 o'clock, go take a shit and scroll some Instagram for 8:15 just to set the tone of the day. I guess everybody would say that they're lying if they don't do the same thing. Cook brekkie and then head off to training at Sydney West Martial Arts for the Monday, the Wednesday, the Friday and the Saturday morning sessions. And then I train every afternoon besides the Friday. Starting to do some private lessons and stuff on the Friday evening, just to fill in a little bit of time. Like I said previously, I obviously run a pretty successful online personal training business. So I do that when I'm not training. If I'm not training or doing that, I'm eating. If I'm not doing that, I'm sleeping. My lifestyle's pretty autistic, to be honest. I like the way that the things are set in the way that they are. And I think for anybody listening, in terms of thinking about themselves and progressing, is if you have the ability to do things that you really enjoy every single day, don't think that you need variety. You actually don't. If they're pulling levers to get you close to where you want to go, then you should be doing those things every single day. If you're doing something you're terribly excited about, why would you not speak about it every single day? And I think that's the formation of things that you start to have to put together in your mindset to say, what do I really want to have happen in my life? What do I want to achieve? And how am I going to make those things happen? And for me, it's being the best grappler on the planet and also running a successful business. So those are the things that fill my days. I don't really watch a lot of Netflix. I don't really spend much time doing anything else apart from learning, grappling, training, eating, and sleeping. And I think that's very indicative of the results I've started to get in such a short period of time. And that's pretty much how you have to do things.
100%. Look, man, really appreciate your time. It's been really good chat with you. I've really, really enjoyed it. So after ADCC in September, we'd love to catch up with you again. Love to talk about the tournament. Wish you all the best with your training, and we can't wait to see you compete in September, man. Really looking forward to it.
It was absolutely my pleasure. I'd love to have more of a long-form conversation, especially when I come back from ADCC and
100%.
Share a bit about that experience and what that was all like in front of 13,000 people in Vegas. I've never been to America. What an absolute blessing to be able to go to America for a sport like jiu-jitsu. And I look forward to the next encounter with you guys. I appreciate it.
100%.
Thanks very much, man.